to the extent that we can assess the UAW's victory. I mean, and I think part of it is there is no doubt. I mean, regardless of what they've been able to get in terms of the contract, obviously that's the whole point. But there is no doubt that the union is sort of like entering into or exiting this process significantly stronger. Like, I mean, that's the thing that really sort of resonates, is that even in the context of like, Fain seems as sort of aggressive about allowing the union membership to reject the contract as he was in getting the contract. Like, he doesn't. Yeah. There's no, and that seems to empower the union even more, it seems.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's so many things to look for at this stage. And then when we see more of the final agreements and where there's side letters and things that are not as obvious, and there's a lot to see still. But yes, Fain is committed to an incredibly transparent process, and that's fantastic. I think those workers have never known as much about what was going on in negotiations as they did under Fain, really, even when Ruther was there. That was the old big people on a fist, take out a cigar, era, when the whole working class had more power with which to make these threats. Unlike now, when we're practically anemic, by the time I come into the labor movement. So very much more committed to real internal democracy. He campaigned on it. He believes in it. And a central question is, does the struggle make the union stronger? Check that box. Absolutely. Just made the union stronger. Absolutely raised expectations that they're going to win more. So yes, hands down, the success of the strike is clear from the sense of building a stronger union at the end of it and reinstilling the faith of the rank and file members. And what we don't know is how motivating it's going to be to the, non-union sector that's been impossible to organize, the transplants, the German and Japanese auto plants and Korean that are in the US that are just always just beat the wages. They always just beat the wages. Some of what's in this agreement that we do know about, I'll highlight a couple of things, really might make that possible. So first, they won back the COLA and they won back the cost of living adjustment, an annual one. They won back the annual cost of living adjustment from pre-2009, pre the crash of the whole economy. That's very significant. They condensed and won back to just a 3-tier wage scale from like all these tiers that were shoved in and dividing and conquering the workers. They're down to just 3 tiers. That's quite significant. You couldn't probably go to 0 at once. Next contract, maybe they're down to 0 tiers with a just progression of years to get to the end of it. But the really big ones, if you're an auto worker in a non-union plant, is they basically eliminated temporary workers. Because just like the EPS, where they did not do as well, I don't believe, from what we know about both agreements at this stage, again, all of it's qualified, but what I believe is effective on the ratification, like the 5,000 temporary workers who just never get made permanent in these plants, they just perma-temps. That's like its own, colonized empire, right? Working side by side with people who are full-time and getting a much different daily package. They eliminated temps in the Stellantis agreement, at least, where they're going to get 168% raise if you have been a temp and you become made a full-time worker under the contract, 168% over the life of this agreement. That's bonkers. And more importantly, just hearing that by 9 months out from the ratification, everyone who is a temp will be full-time. That's structural power. And then another one that I think really matters that we know of, that's factual, that you don't have to figure out and wait for the 400-page lawyer thing to come out and read it, is Belvedere, which Fain's been talking a lot about. They literally forcing the company, they got an agreement to reopen a plant they had only recently closed 8 months ago. And as the vice president said in their press release about it, this is a contract that something like shows the way to avoid destroying any more working class communities wholesale in this country. We're gonna rebuild the whole communities that are just being hollowed out when these plants close. Now, it's one victory. to reopen a plant. But for people who know anything about negotiations, production decisions, the old concept like control the production process, some way back idea, that they did it with one huge plant that had just been closed, and they destroyed 5,000 lives and destroyed a community. To get that plant to literally open, they had to negotiate a new line would go in there. So it's a new mid-sized truck line that's going to be built at a plant that was just recently mothballed, so it's not too old to take it back into production. They also negotiated getting a battery plant built in Belvedere. That'll be 1,000 more jobs. They got back all 5,000 jobs, or whatever the thousands were. I think it's close to that, from that community by bargaining smartly and understanding their industry. So that's also pretty amazing. And, you know, Fain says all the time, we're going from defense to offense, and that's what they're doing. And that couldn't be enough of that going on in the trade union movement. There's just, you can't have too much of it right now. Like, we need everyone, climate clock ticking,
right?
Next pandemic's coming, whatever it is, there's democracy to save, you know. And we know, I want to make one more point, which I've written about. It's big strikes that lead to changing politics, not politics changing the situation for workers. It's actually quite the opposite. And Chicago and those huge strikes, electing Brandon Johnson, their rank and file mayor last spring as mayor. It's United Teachers Los Angeles, where massive strikes have been happening in the education sector, electing Karen Bass, one of the most progressive members in Congress. And then she, in turn, helped settle that 60,000 worker strike, the more recent one after her election. So it's just the really deep message about how change is going to happen and how we're going to possibly fight to save the planet and everyone on it is by having more massive strikes as fast as we can.
So lastly, what do you see is on the horizon? You know, if we had talked this time last year, we would have said UPS, we would have said maybe UAW. What do you see? What's the next big sector that you see there's going to be a fight?
I mean, the beauty of the two big ones, of the Teamster and the UAW, is that they're national, right? They span labor markets, they span geographic borders, they reach everywhere. And I think, sadly, by the way, I still think it was unfortunate that the Teamsters didn't strike. Because as I just said, big strikes actually are what, and workers winning is what, and a sense of their own power is what can then drive politics. But I don't know that there is an immediate something at the scale of the two of these agreements that have just been so exciting. But I do know that there are plenty of places where contracts are being lined up, meaning common expiration dates. The UAW lined up quaintly in the history of sit-down strikes, and now they're stand-up strike with May of 28. For May Day of 2028, and they're starting to message about getting every progressive local, even if they have an unsupportive national union, to like get locals lined up for May 1, 2028. And there's enough time to do that. Like, every time your contract expires, you can set a new expiration date. And I don't mean that's easy. I've had to strike to get an expiration date to line all the hospitals up in Nevada, right? Every bit, going back to Emma's point about strategy, there's so much strategy that goes into winning and winning big. Like, when I started working with some teacher unions, I will not name them, a bunch of them, a bunch of years ago, in like California and some other states, I said, first thing I want to see is produce a chart for me of when all these contracts and all your locals expire. And they were like, all over the map. Well, you can't build to a statewide strike if you've got contracts expiring 1 year, the next year, the next year, the next year. You got to line them up. And people, very smart people, who hired me to do that work with them, very smart, had never heard of the words contract lineup, because again, we're so anemic and we so forget how to build power. So that's fundamental. So I think it's hard though to just ask for locals to line up for it, because if you're a smart union, like, you have to line up your own sector. That would have been that was hospitals for me. If the United Auto Workers, it's the auto workers. But if you can't, so you have to line up your industry. And then there's always a puzzle. We were doing this in the good years at SEIU, where we would be trying to figure out, do we line up across a sector or do we make it across a geography? So there's again, so much strategy to Emma's earlier point, that people don't see. Although when I'm running campaigns, I want everyone to see it. Certainly all the workers and our top community allies need to understand why we're doing the things we're doing. And the best strikes, they are explaining that, not just all the workers, but really putting workers at the center of strategy. That's what the new book is, putting workers at the center of negotiation strategy, first contract fight strategy. And if I can get to the next book in time, the entire book is on power and strategy. That's it, the whole thing. Everything I ever learned about power and strategy, a few things we're saying right now, trying to jam it out fast as I can.
Well,
I'm excited about that.
I look forward to reading that. Jane McAlevey, always a pleasure. Can't thank you enough for all you've taught us, and just our audience. I know I can just see the IMs piling up of people who are both inspired by what you're talking about and are going to go out and buy your books and start to organize their workplace. Really appreciate your time today. And we're going to put a link to that great profile that the New Yorker did, as well as your books, of course. But folks would really enjoy that profile as well. Thanks so much for your time today.
Looking forward to coming back. All right.
Yes. All right. Yes. We're
Thank
looking
you,
forward to
Jane.
having you. All right. Thanks, Jane.
Take care.